What made you want to teach?
I think I think over the years my reasons have changed, but when I first started to think about teaching, I remembered some of the teachers in my life, and it wasn't really a positive experience, and I felt like that maybe um, I could maybe make a difference there, and so I just really chose teaching because I felt like we needed people who really wanted to do the job and not just show up for a paycheck.
Yeah. How did you decide on like the middle school and the subject you teach?
Well, I taught lower elementary for almost 10 years, and I went with kindergarten, first grade. I did elementary music position, and then I went home to be with my kids to raise my children. So I was home for about 7 years, and when I came back, education had changed so much. Where I had kind of been taught and mentored by old school teachers, I was actually a little too old school for what
Yeah.
was going on. So I said, give me some older kids because I think they won't be so offended by me.
What is your favorite part of the job?
Um, I think the relationships with the kids, like I just enjoy getting to know them so well. And I think parents just think that we're here for a job, but I just enjoy intimately knowing these kids. Like they'll come to me and they'll ask me for advice or they'll just joke around with me. And I just enjoy the intimacy of knowing other people's children,
What is the most challenging part?
knowing that they're other people's children. And everybody's raised differently, so you never know, what your boundaries are until you maybe have pushed a little too far. Um, I guess the real challenge is just the generation has changed so much that there's disrespect that is tolerated in the house. So when they come to school, they don't know how to translate when we don't accept it, and it turns into a hostile relationship. So I think that probably is the biggest challenge of kids just not really having boundaries at home, and then they come here, and when you try to give them boundaries, it makes them feel aggravated.
What changes have happened like after COVID?
Um, there's just so much. I think the technology really has ramped up, and the idea that I am always accessible. I think before COVID, there wasn't so much communication with email and texting and that sort of a thing. But when everybody was home, they realized that they had access to me 24/7. And so when I go home, I get a lot of kids that email me over the weekend, and I do feel guilty because I feel like I need to respond to them right away. But then I also have to remember that I'm kind of off
Yeah.
the clock and I'm with my family. That's one of the biggest things that has changed. And then I think the kids feel like I think they feel like that we owe them a little something. Like we need to give them a little bit more slack, or, well, we missed this part of education, so you should give us more grace or whatever, instead of feeling like that the push that we're pushing them is to try to get them caught back up to where they are.
How did you choose to organize your room?
Like seating arrangement or just
Like in
the
general?
way it is. Well, I wanted it to feel homey. I have a lot of lamps and things around and lights. I just wanted it to feel a little like the way that I would feel comfortable walking into a room. I just don't want it to be stark and, the kids just to be
Yeah.
like, oh, here we go into this sterile learning environment. I wanted it to feel warm and welcoming, so I just tried to put some plants and just a little touch of my personality so they could see that even though sometimes I'm a slave driver, I'm a human and I like pretty things.
Yeah. Um, what was something you weren't prepared for going into teaching?
Um, I think maybe I wasn't prepared to be so personally involved. Um, it's easy to think I'm going to go teach this standard because I am a math teacher and I have to teach standard, standard, standard. But when those kids came in the door, the reality of maybe they didn't have breakfast, or maybe they were yelled at right before they left the house, or maybe their clothes haven't been washed in several days and they know it and they feel like everybody else knows it. Like, I think I just wasn't prepared for the real human that was coming through the door. I think I knew what the job was supposed to be, but I didn't realize that there was a real human that was going to be coming, and I was going to have to overcome what the no breakfast, the yelled at. I mean, I've had kids come in the morning and they just put their head down and they cry. And you have to just know that sometimes you have to wash them with your words.
Yeah.
You have to love on them and be like, hey, I'm sorry you've had a bad day. Just take a minute and we'll get to it.
How do you organize like lesson planning?
I've been doing this for a long time, so my lesson planning, I use my curriculum as my pacing guide. And so since I have been doing these topics for so long, I kind of know what's coming next. My lesson plans are, like I say, from my textbook. So if I know that lesson 12 is going to be slope and, finding, whatever for
Yeah.
eighth grade, then I'm going to just make sure that I gear all of my plans for that week, or my worksheets, or my lessons in Excel, or my lessons for Zern in that way.
How did you end up teaching in Oakdale?
Well, I was working at the bank and I had my teaching degree, and I had a lady there that was friends with the principal at the time, who was Sam Hoskins, and she was asking me, she's like, why are you at the bank? And I was like, I just don't think I can teach. Like, after I did my student teaching, I'm not sure that that's what I want to do. And she said, well, you're not going to work at my bank with a teaching degree. So she actually called Sam Hoskins and said, do you have any open positions? And he had a K-5 music
Yeah.
position open, and he hired me on a Sunday, and I've just been, I did move to Rockwood for a little while. I taught at Ridgeview Elementary for a while, and then I just knew that if I ever came back to teaching, that Oakdale is kind of where my heart was. So,
And then what advice would you give to somebody coming in?
I think that the hardest thing to do is to balance relationship and structure. And I think a lot of new teachers come in and they want to be well accepted and well liked and loved. And I think that you need to come in with how you want the students to treat you for a long time. Because if you come in fun and games, it's really hard to change that.
Yeah.
But if you come in with an attitude of, I'm here to teach school, I'm here to do a job, I'm paid by taxpayers, they are expecting something from me, then the relationship builds to where I can stop
Yeah.
and joke, and then we can pick back up with what we're doing. So I think for young teachers, my biggest advice is just to go in strong with not discipline, but with a character that demands respect, so that you can loosen up when you need to.